applies only to our local debt. It does not affect our external debt, which is far less burdensome in terms of its interest rates. This debt exchange program cannot and does not stand alone. It is part, a critical part, of a much more elaborate program to correct the long-standing systemic weaknesses in our fiscal and economic management that have prevented us from moving forward, from growing even in times of global economic boom when almost every other country was growing. The current crisis has forced us to turn to the IMF and the other multilateral institutions for help. This is vitally necessary to plug the hole resulting from the drop in foreign exchange flows and the fall off in our revenues. Without that help, the exchange rate would fly through the roof and the cost of living would go on fast rapid. Without that help, we would not be able to meet our bills. Essential government services would have to be shut down. It would lead to a catastrophe that is beyond description. The IMF, the World Bank, the IDB, and the Caribbean Development Bank have collaborated to provide us with $2.4 billion over the next 27 months. A half of that will be released over the next few months once the IMF program is approved. This will ensure that the dollar remains stable, that inflation is kept low, that the new lower interest rate regime that will emerge after the debt exchange is sustained over the long term, and that those rates will go down even further. What are the critical elements of this program? We must control expenditure. We must cut our cloth to fit our suit. The debt exchange program will save us 40 billion Jamaican dollars a year in expenditure. The public sector wage bill will be frozen over the next 2 years. We have made provisions for retroactive payments due to teachers and the reclassification of nurses and other health sector workers, but these cannot be paid at one time. They will have to be spread over the next few years. The Public Sector Transformation Unit is working vigorously on the program to reduce the size and cost of government, and we will start implementing these changes in the new financial year. Some agencies and departments will be merged, cost management centers identified, responsibility and authority more closely aligned, and performance targets and measurements established to ensure greater efficiency at lower cost. Travel expenses, purchases of goods and services, utility bills must all be reduced to specified levels. Ministries and agencies will be required to report on a monthly basis all outstanding bills and commitments, so there is no build-up in arrears that can eventually throw the budget out of line. Waivers will be drastically curtailed. All existing incentives will be reviewed, and where they are no longer necessary, they will be withdrawn. The Central Treasury Management System will be established to bring all of government's financial resources under central management to ensure better utilization. Would you believe that many times the government is borrowing money at 20% when it has huge sums of money sitting down somewhere, sometimes earning little or no interest? Implementation of the tax administration program will be accelerated. No, I don't mean more GCT or more gas tax. You have had enough of those. I did already indicate that adjustments will be made in property taxes because they are woefully outdated. Some persons, for example, living on expensive property are paying little more than a pittance for property tax. All property taxes go to fund local services such as solid waste management and street lighting. And what is being collected now is insufficient to pay those bills, so we have had to find money out of the budget to pay JPSCO and the Solid Waste Management Authority. We cannot do that anymore. So come April 1st, adjustments will be made to ensure that those monies can be found. The level of adjustments will be tempered by an aggressive drive to collect property tax from those who have not been paying, we are going to get tough. We will use our powers to advertise for sale those properties whose owners refuse to pay their tax. There are some user fees that will have to be adjusted. I give you an example. There are certain documents that have to be stamped at the court's office, for which the fees are as low as 20 cents. That was set from the days when 20 cents was 2 shillings. Those will have to be adjusted to something sensible. The main focus of the tax administration program will be enforcement and collection. People who owe taxes must pay their taxes. It is more taxes we want, not more taxation. Fiscal burdens that have worn down the budget will be removed. We have improved efficiencies at the JUTC, but bus fares will have to be increased to reduce the losses even further and lessen the burden on the budget. We expect shortly to conclude the sale of Air Jamaica, which incurred losses last year of $9 billion. We are negotiating the sale of our shares in Clarendon Alumina Production to remove the burden of production losses caused by the forward sale contract of 2005, which is costing us almost $1 billion per month. We are seeking to refinance Highway 2000, from which we earn no revenue, but which is costing us almost $3 billion in annual interest payments. We are still optimistic that we will be successful in divesting the rest of the sugar factories and estates, because let it be clear, the government will not be able to cover any more losses in the sugar industry, and I have given clear instructions that no such request will be entertained by the Ministry of Finance. We have appointed an enterprise team to proceed with the privatization of the Norman Manley Airport. We are pursuing rail live options to finance the new Petrojam refinery in a way that will require no financial contribution or guarantee from the government, since we will not be in a position to do so. Discussions with our Venezuelan partners and possible sources of finance are being actively pursued, and a joint Jamaica-Venezuelan team is to travel to Japan shortly in that regard. We are negotiating to sell our shares in JPSCO so that we can pay down some of our debt. Many other public assets that are not essential to government's core functions will be sold as soon as the market can absorb them. We want a leaner government structure that is able to direct all its energies and resources to performing properly the essential functions of government. Some of you will ask, have we not heard this before? Yes, you have, but this time it is different. It is different because under the IMF agreement, we won't be left on our own. We will have to meet rigid performance tests dealing with, among other things, the fiscal deficit, inflation, debt levels, and debt to GDP ratio. These tests will also include implementation of agreed policy and legislative measures. We have agreed to an intensive and extensive program of monitoring and surveillance. There is data that we will have to transmit on a daily, weekly, fortnightly, and monthly basis. We will be subjected to quarterly performance tests, with the first scheduled for March 31st. We are required to introduce legislation to establish a fiscal responsibility framework in which we will have to present our targets to Parliament and will be held accountable for our performance in relation to those targets. So it's not just the IMF that will be monitoring our performance. The opposition, the media, and the public at large will also be able to measure our performance. It is a belt and braces approach because, make no mistake, we can't afford to deviate from this program. We can't afford to slip back into the ways of the past. Slackness, skylarking, and failure are no longer options that are open to Jamaica. I know that these harsh economic times weigh heavily on the very poor and vulnerable.